Greetings, book lovers everywhere. I'm E-Train and welcome back to E-Train Talks. And today, I am so lucky to discuss the amazing read, Secret of the Shadow Beast and all things books with the amazing, fantastical, just downright incredible author of 3 middle grade books, which I absolutely love. And she's also located in Maine, an advocate for reading, and she is my writing hero. All authors are my writing heroes. I'm super excited to be here with the New York Times bestselling author and New York Times Editor's Choice author of The Mad Wolf's Daughter, The Hunt for the Mad Wolf's Daughter, and Secret of the Shadow Beast. You know her, you love her, and her books, Diane Magras. Thank you so much for joining me today, Diane. It's an honor to talk with you.
Oh gosh, thank you so much, E-Train. What a fabulous intro. I am deeply honored to be here too.
Thank you. And I'm sure everybody listening wants to know a little bit about your writing in general. What can we expect when we read your books, and what can we look forward to?
Well, you can expect fast-paced action. That seems to be something that's very much my brand. Fully fleshed out characters. That's something that I love to write too. So I have a combination of action, kids with weaponry, but also a lot of heart. I think you'll find all of that in my work. And then a little touch of humor. I try to add some, I really hope there are some laugh out loud moments in all of my books. But the fast-paced action and the cliffhanger chapter endings are probably the biggest thing people can expect. And imaginative work. I hope my books feel like friends and feel like good escapes and keep people thinking when they read them.
They certainly are. And I have to say that chapter cliffhangers are a lot nicer than end of book cliffhangers. Because, hey, we can just go to the next chapter and we'll find out what happens next. And action, fast-paced kind of books, they're the best for both avid readers and reluctant readers. So I know everybody watching who's read your books or is just learning about them is extremely grateful for your contributions to all readers. And that leads me to my next question. That was my horrible attempt at a drum roll. So Secret of the Shadow Beast is a book that keeps the reader on the edge of their seat. Like, I almost fell off. It was so entertaining. I wanted to know what happened next. And it's also filled with epic battle scenes, family and friendship, humor, and tons of adventures. So I read that your writing space is directly in front of a window that looks out upon nature. How does your writing space help inspire such epic battles, fight scenes, also just friendship and loving characters?
I would love to say that it's the nature I see, it's the squirrels and the wild turkeys and the deer, but really it's the fact that they don't bother me, and it's very quiet and it's very peaceful. And I sometimes glance out at that, but usually I'm just focused on my computer, and I have a state of kind of hypnosis where I'm deep in my novel, deep in my characters' worlds. I'm aware of the page, but I'm with them in their brains, seeing what's happening. I mean, it's really funny. Sometimes when I'm writing, I'll write an emotional scene. Like there's some scenes in Secret of the Shadow Beast. There's a chapter end when you probably know the one when Nora learned something about her dad. And as I was writing that, I was just taking a tissue in my I was just feeling her so deeply. So the nature outside my window relaxes me and just kind of keeps out of my way. That's how it inspires me. It just gives me the quiet and the freedom, I think, to write whatever comes to mind.
Yeah, that certainly makes a lot of sense. I have a big tree outside, and it's kind of a peaceful neighborhood. And the fact that it's a peaceful neighborhood, that does not inspire my writing. It inspires me to keep writing because it's quiet. So I really understand where you're coming from. And books don't have to be inspired by your surroundings. Sometimes they're inspired by your imagination. Because I know that you imagine things, and I imagine things, and everybody, all writers and all people, our imaginations aren't just based off where we are. They can take us to magical places and lands where there are ombre, shadow beasts, and swords, and still some futuristic parts that are in our world. And speaking of, where was the inspiration? Like, where did it come from? So, Secret of the Shadow Beast is a lot of medieval kind of sword fights and that kind of stuff, but there's also a lot of futuristic parts. Like, there's video game chat boxes and, well, libraries. They're always the best. So how did you kind of find that balance for kind of, I guess in a sense, some parts of the book, they feel like they're set in the past, but a lot of it is also basically kind of set in the present.
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I think my love of medieval worlds, my love of medieval history definitely played into that. You probably noticed that there are a couple of characters who are obsessed with history. That's came directly from me. But I wanted to construct a world that drew upon some traditions that the characters might have had in their society. And so the founder of the whole orders, the McCaskill orders, Sir Colm McCaskill, was a fan of history too, and so constructed them to be like ancient medieval orders. At the same time, Nora notices when she joins little elements of the whole world of her new training environment that they mirror her video game, Warriors of the Frozen Bog. And that's because a lot of video games are based also on some medieval constructs. So that's one way that I combine the high tech and the historical. It's the video game. And so many aspects of her world, like she's like a video game character in real life doing that work, defeating the shadow beast, the Umbrai, and using her massive axe, which in one scene she says looks exactly like the axe in her video game. That was something I was conscious of when I was writing, and really had a lot of fun doing. So I think astute readers who play a lot of RPGs will notice little elements in the fiction itself, not just the chat boxes, that will feel a bit like they're gaming.
Well, I don't necessarily play RPGs. I'm not really allowed to. I've got to say, Mom, I told you video games were good because I love video games, and seeing them portrayed in middle grade just makes me smile because it's not necessarily a video game book. The book is kind of a video game in a sense, but it's not just about a controller in your hands. Life is kind of like a video game. Although video games can still sometimes, if you're addicted to them, they're not the best, but they're still pretty cool. And I particularly enjoy them and enjoyed that part of Secret of the Shadow Beast. Do you like video games?
I do. I'm a big Minecraft player.
Me
My son,
too.
my son, I thought, isn't Minecraft fantastic? My
Yeah.
son got me into Minecraft, and he is an amazing architect in Minecraft, an amazing builder. And I mean, we're working on, oh, I don't want to take up this interview telling you about what we're building, but we're building the best airport with
Cool.
offices and all kinds of cool things. Anyway, I absolutely love it. And actually, it was the Minecraft chat. I was watching a Minecraft championship while I was
Oh yeah, I
writing.
watched that too.
Yeah, aren't those great? I love watching those. I was watching one of those when I was working on probably the second draft of Secret of the Shadow Beasts, and I was paying attention to how the players were chatting. And I thought that is so great. There are kids in different, or people, they're not all kids, in different countries having that communication and having that close relationship. And so that's one of the things that inspired the chat boxes when Nora and her best friend Wilfred, her gaming buddy, once she's away from her home and training to fight monsters in real life, and he's still, a championship gamer back at home, they still have their relationship and have that opportunity to interact and have their friendship strained because of their very different lives. Anyway, I had so much fun with the chat boxes.
Yeah, I really love that part of the story. And speaking of Minecraft Championship, there is one today. It's going on today. I think it's Minecraft Championship 23. I'm not too sure, but it's going on today, so I'm very excited for that.
Yes.
And now my next question, because I don't want to fill up the entire interview with video game stuff.
We could.
Video games are the best. So I mentioned in my book review that I'm not always the biggest fantasy fiction fan, but I love it when I'm proven wrong. Secret of the Shadow Beast took me on a reading adventure I couldn't put down. I think the fact that you wrote such likable protagonists and included such a meaningful backstory really pulls the reader into the book. I could really relate to everybody, from Nora to Wilford to the ombre themselves.
Yeah.
So I also just really, really relate to Nora because, like her, I recently started a new school and had to find ways to fit in and make new friends. But it's not just the personal relationships I enjoyed. Your writing style is just downright relatable, and I absolutely adored everything about it. So, where was the idea? Like, how did it come just poof in your mind for Nora, the ombre, everything?
Oh,
Or just the basis?
it really did kind of poof in my mind, but it came from agonizing, that's probably not too light a word, over different kind of novel ideas for more than a year. So the Umbrai came from, oh gosh, years ago, not years ago. I've always had in the back of my mind, I've wanted to write a story about monsters that kids have to fight. And that was pretty much where I was. And I had no idea where to go with that. And then time passed. I kept touching on that, coming up with different scenarios. None of them felt quite right. Then in 2019, it just felt like a year with unbelievable climate disasters. We had fires in many places, like horrible wildfires in your own state.
Yeah.
And then landslides and floods and just so many things. I remember thinking, this is almost like nature is trying to stop humankind from perpetuating climate emergencies. And then my mind clicked, and I thought, what if the monsters came from that? What if the monsters are trying to stop humans from perpetuating climate disaster? So suddenly I had the Umbrai, or at least I had a concept that would evolve into the Umbrai. And I wasn't sure who the kids would be or what I'd do with it. So I sat with that for a few months. Nora Kemp was a character in a completely different plot, a rural kid who didn't fit in with her world. And she didn't quite fit in with that plot, though, that she was in at the time either. And then one day, somehow, I was thinking of them both at the same time, and whoop, they came together, and the whole story just fell into place. It's magical when that happens. Doesn't always.
Yeah.
But it took a lot of thinking about both of those and really mulling over those ideas separately before I figured out how to combine them.
Yeah, it's certainly magical when something just clicks in your mind. And I just really love the theme and the idea that maybe Mother Nature is kind of we fight the world in a sense. We're kind of destroying it. And Mother Nature, the world is just destroying us right back. They're teaching us a lesson. And I hope that everybody watching and just everybody in general really understands that if we destroy the world, we're kind of destroying ourselves in a sense. So it's really interesting to know that that was your thought process, because that was certainly mine when I read Secret of the Shadow Beasts. So, and I just always love climate change books about environmental justice. In fact, I'm featuring Secret of the Shadow Beasts on my first segment on TV for my book review segment. And I'm very excited for that. And Secret of the Shadow Beasts is just absolutely epic. It deserves to be shared all over. And my next question is, so it's about your research. When researching information for our talk, I read that you enjoy studying cultures whose stories aren't often told. Do you try to shine a light on obscure rituals and people in your writing? And if so, would you share an example or two about maybe a culture that you shined a light on in your books?
I try in my own writing to focus on cultures that I'm really intimately familiar with. So ones that I have some really deep personal connection with. And so they tend to be more European cultures. With those, I try to focus on voices that aren't often heard. So in my first two books, I switched the traditional medieval narrative and I told it from a girl's perspective. And I have a lot of female empowerment messages in those books. In Secret of the Shadow Beasts, I tried to have a very diverse cast in many senses of that word to depict, our world. We live in a diverse global world. So I try to depict that in the book as well. But one thing I also try to do to kind of feed my interest in other cultures different from my own, is share books by other authors. I'm just going to hold up a few here. These are some books I love dearly, and this is Yusuf Azim is Not a Hero by Sadia Faruqi. It is a fantastic story of a Muslim American boy dealing with the history of 9/11 from a Muslim American perspective. An incredible book from a perspective that I couldn't write in a million years, but Sadia lived through that. So this is really based on, you know, her experience. David A. Robertson's The Barren Grounds. This is such a fabulous fantasy. If you like the Chronicles of Narnia, this is an Indigenous person's version of the Chronicles of Narnia in a way, with a lot of really, really powerful messages about what it means to be in a place that's invaded, violently invaded, and how to be part of a community that protects itself in nature. I mean, this is such a good book, and it's a whole series. And then A Wish in the Dark is by Christina Sunvat. Oh my goodness, I'm gonna say her name correctly. Suntornvat. There, Suntornvat. She tells you how to say it on her website, so good. That's a help. This is a Thai-inspired fantasy, and she describes it as kind of Les Miserables from a Thai version of that, and it's full of adventure and just beautiful images. There's so much in this, but I'll just say it involves a girl who has law enforcement issues and a boy who has other law enforcement issues of the opposite kind, and really deciding who is your enemy and who is your friend. Such a good book. So that's how I try to share books by people who are writing about cultures that I'm not familiar with, to kind of uplift those voices, because I think it's really important for people to read beyond their own immediate experiences.
Definitely.
People to see books that they relate to. So if I have listeners who are from one of those ethnicities or cultures, to see there are people writing their stories out there, I think that's really, really important too.
Yeah, so many books really portray the term windows and mirrors.
Exactly.
Yeah. That was the word that immediately came to mind when you were talking about all of your recommendations, and my to be read list gets ever larger. Every interview I take part in, or with every author I interview, I really need to read Christina's books. I have The Last Mapmaker on nearly the top of my book stack. So I'm excited to check out Christina's writing. It's very notable, and it's not just award-winning, but it's also meaningful. So I'm really thrilled that I have the opportunity to dive into Christina's book. And it's so great that you're shining a light on cultures that aren't often talked about, and they're not talked about nearly enough in middle grade and YA, children's books, just all children's books. So on behalf of everybody, while I can't speak for everybody, I do want to say thank you. And I think we all agree that what you do for the writing community is so appreciated.
Oh, thank you.
And my next question is, so like me, you've been an avid reader from a young age, and I'm sure everybody listening is curious to know how you developed a love of reading from a young age. And do you have an idea of how and why you started reading so young? Just can you share like a brief summary about your reading and eventually writing journey, and just a brief summary?
Sure. Well, I owe it to my parents, especially my mom. My mom was a second grade teacher and believed strongly in reading aloud. And so when my brothers and I were little, she read to us constantly every day. So I was a younger sibling, and so I was always there, like in her arms as she was reading to my older brother. So I developed, when I was an infant, before I could even understand what she was reading, I developed such a love of stories and reading from that age. And so and my parents, both of them, my dad read to me at night. This is a story I often tell, and he loves to remember this too. So he used to read, when I was around 6 or 7, he tried to read The Hobbit to me by J.R. Tolkien. And It is a wonderful story, perhaps not the most appropriate thing to read to a 6 or 7-year-old. It petrified me because it's a scary story with the orcs and with Gollum and all of that. Well, Gollum was the character that really scared me the most. And so I stopped the story when I got to the point of being too scared, and I told him that actually the story was about Gollum, not about Bilbo Baggins. And I completely retold the story, and he had to sit there and listen to me tell him what actually happened in this book. And so that's an example of how I started telling stories, I think, like that moment, because he remembers being frustrated with my interrupting his reading, but also delighted in my creativity. And it's wonderful because both of my parents fostered my creativity. They provided me with the books. My dad actually got me a personal computer when I was a teenager, and I was borrowing his computer to write. And they just have always supported my writing and my reading.
That's a lovely story. And I think that the mark of a great author, a great writer in general, is that they retell stories, their minds kind of twist stories differently than a lot of other people. So if I was your brother when you were 6 or 7, I would have thought, whoa, Diane, you're going to be an author. And now you are. So is that always your dream, to be an author?
It definitely is. It definitely has been, and it still is. And it's actually funny because that older brother who sat there listening to stories with me, he is a 6th grade teacher. Wow. And I've actually spoken to his classroom, and it's just a really cool moment of together being this family that cares about books, once again, as adults.
Best kind.
Yeah.
So now it's kind of a follow-up to the last question. So why do you think some kids really love reading from a young age, but others, they don't really appreciate books, or they just don't really like it at all?
I think for kids who love reading, they've probably not all kids have access to books. And I know kids who have grown up without a lot of family access to books who still love reading. So I think some kids just have a desire to read stories and to tell stories, in their blood. But I think other kids do have it in their blood, but they don't know it. They may not be confident readers, and they may not have found a book that really speaks to them. I know some authors who grew up drawing comics and became authors later. I think there are so many types of storytelling, and kids may not realize that they are actual storytellers and they're actually authors, even if they're telling stories through a comic strip or Minecraft, building, creating. I know a lot of kids who create video game premises, and those are definitely stories. So I hope that young people who don't necessarily consider themselves readers know that they are storytellers. I think most people are, and there is a book out there for them. They just haven't found it yet, and don't give up. I mean, some people don't find the book that's the book that means so much to them, that inspires them to do something, to write, or to live a better life, or to read over and over again until they're adults.
So I read that you wrote your first novel when you were in middle school, and I find that amazing because I seem to always be starting novels. Well, maybe they might not even be novels. They just might be stories, short stories. Maybe just like a 1-chapter book. I find it really hard to finish. Just, what is your idea? How can we stick to stories and really just keep on going? And boom, my mind is set on one storyline.
That is hard, because I think every writer, every professional author has so many ideas that are constantly trying to push them off whatever idea they're working on. First of all, that's common. Everyone's dealing with that. I have this. In fact, I have a whole stack of these. This is my current writing notebook. You can see it has bookmarks and then little strings to it. So it has many bookmarks. I put all my ideas in this. So when I'm working on one novel, I use this to write down all my other ideas and just hold them here and try not to get distracted. But before I start a novel, I mull over ideas. And again, I put the ideas in here. So I'll write out a premise, like who's my protagonist, what do they care about, what kind of world are they in, what's their goal, what's their preventing them from reaching their goal, and who cares, why does it matter, what are the stakes of the story. I try to put something like that together. Sometimes I just have an idea, like this is a world, I want to write a story about vampires, and so I'll just say, okay, vampire story, and I'll sketch some ideas. I won't start writing an actual novel until I know that it's the right one. And so I did this actually when I was in middle school too. I would write down who my major characters were. Back then I would write a full description of each of my major characters. These days I just write really quick, sketchy details. I have their names. I always have their names. And the basic plot, the beginning and the middle and the end. And that, knowing those two elements, who your characters are, who your protagonist is, and more or less what's going to happen in your story, that once you feel confident about all of that and sit on that for a few days or even up to a week and write little scenes, that helps too, to just make sure that this is the right idea. It is hard though. And I would say, don't be afraid if you find that you're writing an idea and and you feel like you don't know what to do next, end it, kill off your characters or do something to just bring it to an end. And know you can always go back and revise and make it longer or make it just a perfect short story. There's nothing wrong with that.
Do you still have that original novel?
I have it somewhere on an old floppy disk for the computer I was using then. I don't know how I could use that because I don't have a computer.
I don't want to sound old, but what is a floppy disk?
It's about this. It's an index. It's about this big, a little bit smaller. And you would stick it into your computer, not exactly like a CD, but kind of like a CD. It would hold information, not very much information. And so I'd back up my work on that. But I don't have that. I have notebooks. I can tell you that my first novel was entitled Bianca, and it was the story of a girl who went off on some kind of adventure, I don't remember what, with a boy who had a sword. And I'm a bit ashamed that he had the sword and she didn't in this story. But I think I was basing this on the kinds of works that I was reading then. A lot of adventures, certainly when I was growing up, had girls in submissive roles. She was more active, but not as active, certainly, as my girl with a sword dressed in The Mad Wolf's Daughter, where I corrected my mistake.
And now, I'm very sad that it's time for my final question, the question I ask every single author I interview, every single literacy advocate, every kindness advocate. If you could be or meet any literary character, whether it's a main character in your least favorite book, a very, 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 like a character with one line in your favorite novel, or your favorite author or least favorite author, who would it be and why?
That is really, really hard. And you were kind to send me that question in advance, and I have been mulling over that, and I have so many answers. But I ended up with what I hope is not too boring an answer. But I would actually love to meet Nora Kemp, my own character, and see who she is according to her. Because in that book, she is a person according to how I see her. And I would love to know, what did she feel this was the right story for her? Did she like the way I depicted her? How would she want to be depicted? And what are her dreams for her future? Not my dreams for her, but hers. I'd really like to know her perspective, because I'm always, as I said, I'm interested in the voices that people don't often share. And even though I tried to share her voice in Secret of the Shadow Beasts, she's a rural kid from an environment that, she doesn't often get people listening to her. So I'd want to be someone who does.
That wraps up today's interview. Diane, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm just so happy I was able to read your novel and have you on my podcast, because you're an inspiration to me and a lot of other readers out there. And I'm going to do everything I can to share Secret of the Shadow Beast, because it deserves to be shared. But not just that, because I love it. So, my guest today, everybody, has been the incredibly talented and wonderful middle grade author, Diane Magras. Thank you so much for joining me today, Diane. Secret of the Shadow Beast is a story full of friendship and adventures, and castles and swords, and video games, and downright amazingness. So, what's not to like, everybody? I highly recommend reading this book. And just thank you so much, Diane. You're the best.
Oh, thank you, E-Train. This has been so much fun.
Yeah, it truly has. And you can follow Diane's writing journey on her Twitter, her Instagram, and your website. The links for all those are in the description. And because I don't want to say like maybe underscore or www, because in case you don't know what that means, because let's face it, not everybody's tech savvy. I'm a kid and I'm still not super tech savvy, so that's where you can follow Diane's journey. Just look at the description, and that's all for today. Be sure to keep checking back so you don't miss what I'm up to next. Go to my website, go to my Twitter, and just until then, keep reading, stay safe. I mean, obviously keep reading. And maybe that next book on your to-be-read stack is going to be Secret of the Shadow Beast. It should be. It really should be. I'll find you. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.